Welcome to Martial Wisdom. Here you can listen to conversations on all kinds of topics related to martial arts. Today's topic is pressure testing in Aikido. And joining me for this discussion is Dunken Francis. You've probably noticed that episodes have not been coming out as frequently as they have in the past. This is from a combination of things, but I still love putting this material out for all of you. I wish there were more hours in the day. I'm still adding videos every week to the Spirit Aikido online program, which now has over 350 videos. In the latest series, I covered an initial response which is useful for a wide variety of attacks. The purpose is to eliminate the confusion over how to respond by making the decision process simple and fast. I show a number of different endings and options to train and experiment with, all of which are simple and high percentage. I encourage you to check it out. My profound thanks to those who have subscribed to the program and those who have contributed to the PayPal tip jar. I hope you enjoy this episode. Now, on with the discussion. All right, I'm very excited to have Dunken Francis, my friend, back here again on the Modern Aikidoist podcast and Martial Wisdom. We got an interesting discussion today, and he brought this topic up to me about a week ago, and I've been looking forward to having this discussion on pressure testing in Aikido. I think this is going to be an invigorating discussion. So, Dunken, thanks for coming on.
Pleasure. Nice to be back. Yeah, so very briefly, we, as you know, we've got a YouTube channel, and someone suggested that we cover off some topics quite broadly, rather than being demonstration videos or being live stream things, just something to stimulate discussion, get some conversation going backwards and forwards, and see where it goes, especially the things that are a bit more kind of open-ended. And one of the things that we've been playing with in the dojo recently is the idea of not just pressure testing, because we do that anyway, but introducing pressure testing in a way that is manageable for both advanced students and new people. So, you know, I just stuck the camera on and ranted for 58 seconds, and 3 days later it's got whatever it is, 5,000 views. So it's obviously a subject that is compelling for people, shall we say. Seems to be two sides to it. Lots of the Aikido is an art of peace people saying, oh no, there's no punching in Aikido, and there's no this and there's, okay, that's fine. That's absolutely fine. As far as I'm concerned, if you're not training an art as a martial art, then that's fine. But largely then the pressure testing conversation is moot. It's largely pointless. Then there was people also arguing the Aikido art of peace thing, and then in the same sentence talking about O-sensei saying 90% of Aikido is a Temi. So I was getting a bit confused. And this is something that happens not just in Aikido, but I think in all martial arts, that people will cherry pick things from tradition, from the stories and from the myths. I mean, every martial art's got myths. I mean, Aikido's even got O-sensei dodging bullets, which is clearly ludicrous. Mm-hmm. But the roots of that obviously were important at the time. It was obviously an event that had a lot of effect on people, and has just been told in a number of different ways from different perceptions, so we say, but it happens in all arts. The thing with the pressure testing that unless you actually are no, hang on, let me take a backtrack. I've got to be careful how I do this. I don't want your video to be full of people screaming at you. Okay. Yeah, so this is my take on it. I want to give that. So I've been doing this a long time. Started in the 70s as a kid. One of the things that the big realization for me was that technical training, so our waza or our techniques that everybody in all martial arts holds so sacred, they are basically like learning scales or learning chords for a musical instrument. They are demonstrations of a basic mechanical process that allow you to perform either a principle or a series of principles. So something like Ikkyo, the sacred number one technique. It allows you to learn as a beginner things like Rasen, the spiraling connections from a limb through to the spine, or Toshi, the body drop, obviously Kazushi, taking balance, etc., etc. people that are more biomechanically minded will immediately reference Ikkyo as being a shoulder rolling forwards, which takes you into a forwards balance point. It shifts the weight into the toes or into the balls of the feet. Sometimes it will peel the instep up and roll you to the outside. All of these things. So it's a brilliant drill for teaching principles, which you then should be able to develop and use in whatever situation. Unfortunately, what happens is that we get stuck in these technique-minded, and if your foot isn't exactly in the same position as your sensei's, you have to do it again. Mm-hmm. And it never gets past that. What we should be doing, I believe, is getting the principle right. Okay, he's got him down. Wasn't exactly the same as how I do it, but he's 2 foot taller than me, as everyone is, The shoulder's lower than the hand. He's rolling the shoulder forwards. He's not got tension in his upper body. He dropped his weight. That's all fine. Okay, let's try it again. Grab him again. This time, just use your fingertips. Try and give him a slap round the head. Don't be too mad, but just to make sure he's moving off the line. And that way you're adding in a tiny level of pressure testing. If they're students with a couple of years experience, they can pull and push and try and do the slap. And then it makes people realize then that the basic waza, the basic technique, is only a demonstration of a principle. And to make that principle work, you have to have the appropriate situation. We've got a big sign in our dojo wall: move off the line, take the balance, react appropriately. That is the hub of everything. And you might start off doing what you think is going to be an Ikkyo, but if the partner pulls you in really closely and locks their arm close to their body, you're not doing an Ikkyo. But you might have something else that then gives you an opportunity. You might be able to get them in a headlock, or knee them in the groin and take hold of their head and do it. And I know that doesn't sound like Aikido, but it's the creative use of the principles that we're being taught, that we should be being taught and passing on. And for me, that's how the pressure testing fits into what we're doing. So obviously it's up to everyone to scale this up. But we started off with the wrist grabs and just gently adding in an atemi, sure, depending on who the person is with. So we've got a very petite lady and we've got to go 6'7". It's no good me saying punch him in the nose, because she can't reach his nose. Mm-hmm. So she has to go for something else. So with her, she makes up the difference in the imai and the difference in the arm length by using low kicks. She'll go to the inside of the knee. It doesn't have to be brutal, just enough so that he acknowledges there's something there, and it makes him flinch back, which brings his head down and brings his shoulders forwards, etc., etc. And we just use that kind of process to add in a little bit of, it is basically testing of the principle. And the good thing with it is that early on, you see even white belts saying, this doesn't work when he does that, does it, Sensei? And I go, no, because we kind of, I had my respect for my Sensei, Hayden Foster, was, he was like a grandfather and a mentor and an astonishingly authentic man. And I basically, for a decade or so, just thought what he did was, that was it. You could use every technique in every situation. And it wasn't until I started cross-training with other arts that you realize that things are constantly changing. You have to have the waza or the techniques train your understanding of the principles until they get internalized enough. Then you're like a musician. Then if the band changes key, you can change key with it. The band speeds up, you can speed up. If the band's going too fast, you can drag the beat back. I'm sorry about the musical metaphors. I'm a musician. It's the only one I've got. But you see, this is how I frame it. This is how it feels to me. And the more I've played about with this, and obviously within our group, we've got 7 or 8 different martial arts represented in our organization now. The more I talk to some of the other arts, all of them, apart from the Aikido people, seem to have some form of, let's call it pressure testing or light sparring. And I think that's massively missing. Now, I know you guys, you do a similar thing, don't you?
Yeah, we do. And in fact, that's what I wanted to lead off with was what I have found is there are a few different definitions of pressure testing. And for anybody listening, I think it would be good for us to cover some different ones because it's easy to try to hear a description of one and think that it doesn't fit what you have in mind because you're thinking of something else. Not you, but whoever might be listening. And what I have found is that there are to me, the first stage of pressure testing, and this is, I think, where anybody coming from a kata-based art, the first step they need to make along this direction is merely just adding in a little bit of resistance or one other variable, like having their attacker feint them or try to escape halfway through a technique being done to them and try to evade. Just to add one little layer, but it will go farther than that. And for those people, and I recall, this rather sad and dreadful incident years ago where we had, I shouldn't say we, because this young man claimed to be an Aikido student and wasn't, and he wanted to go prove Aikido, and he went into a dojo and said, I want to show that what Aikido can do and test this, and he got an ass beat. I mean, hard. And I think the crucial error there is the expectation of testing the art or testing his skill. And that is, the first thing to know is if you can't do it at like 30% intensity, don't think you're going to succeed at 80% or 100%. Because this is one of the most common things that I've heard in almost every discussion or argument about pressure testing is they think it's 100% everything, full on fight. And that may be the ultimate goal, but that is not where you want to start with pressure testing your technique. I'll assure you that. And when years ago, when Rokas first went into a ring with his MMA fighter friend, that guy was going maybe 30% intensity and he just had no response. Like Rokas couldn't do anything. And so, but he found out there without getting his teeth beat in or slammed hard and sent to the hospital that there was issues with what he was taught and trying to apply. And so as you learn, if you want to go down that road, do it in graduated steps. Don't try to go all the way to
from an instructor's point of view, that's actually a very difficult thing to do.
It is very difficult. And
we've got our pressure testing that we do in scales, and we've also got the sparring that we actually got 4 level sparring system. But trying to develop that, make it safe, make it valuable, and make it usable for people of all levels is actually a very tricky thing.
It is tricky. It takes some patience and it takes letting your ego go, because this is where I shouldn't want to say necessarily the ego, but it's you take away the one thing that you want, which is the stress, because pressure testing is you could put it under the stress inoculation category of training. You want to get used to a stressful situation where you can remain calm and perform without getting into that high stress state yourself, where your technique goes to garbage. You want to try to keep that as much as possible. And in testing it, you want to basically test your spirit to see that you don't become unglued and panic. And again, you do that in graduated stages, but to me, you also don't do it by throwing a million variables at the student initially, because you will get overwhelmed even at 20 or 30% intensity. And what I heard you describe was actually what I would call a Henkawaza type situation, where you're looking to adapt to changing conditions. And I think that alone,
that comes out of the pressure testing.
Yes, with even at a low level of pressure or low level of stress, that is incredibly difficult to do. But it should be trained. It should be, and that's where like even the grapplers who work at low intensity, but they just keep going and going and going, and they're always adapting, and positions are changing, and they need to counter and correctly and evade. Like that is a valuable skill. And I think that is best trained at a lower intensity level, because it allows it. You go slowly enough that your mind can start to can study and understand. So once you burn in those patterns, now you can start your body's used to it. Now you can start upping the speed and the intensity without coming unglued and panicking. Like that to me is the process. And so pressure testing is far more than just saying, okay, I've done, my katas 5 million times and I've got them down, and now it's okay, go time. Then, try to kick my ass. Like that's a bridge too far, one might say.
Sure. Yeah. And once people start going 100%, you always get accidents. I mean,
right.
Occasionally when I've let my guys, go, well, probably 80% to be realistic, because they're not stupid, but you get the odd finger in the eye and things like that, and it's just counterproductive to actually learning. Also, the reality of a real situation, and again, this is another thing for another conversation. Most martial artists or dojo martial artists have never been in a fight, and they don't understand the randomness and the ferocity and the emotional and physical, but also the emotional and physical pathway. Most fights, there's the tension, there's the build up, there's the big explosion, and then within 50 seconds, most of the time, your average person in the street is done, is burnt out. And then the pace changes, and so to go flat out in the dojo with someone that's young and fit and you're already warmed up and stuff, it's not representative of what you're going to meet. Sticking at 75% and being a little bit more tactical about it and acknowledging what's happening. Okay, I tried to do that and that got me tagged. Okay, I'll do it again. I'm more successful. I'm taller than this guy. I'm going to try and use my height to get over the top and get behind and take him. I'm smaller. I'm going to try and pass under the arm, and I'm going to try and take his back that way, or whatever it is. And it becomes much more strategic, and there's a lot more lessons that actually sink in. It's but the Henkawaja thing, you're absolutely right. We sometimes, and again, it depends on the class, but we sometimes will do a basic technique, especially if we've got some absolute new people on the mat, and I just want to kind of have a bit of fun with them. We'll do something completely basic, and then we'll add a little bit of pressure in. As you say, a push or a pull or a little fingertip tap or something like that. And I won't give anyone any clues, and I'll just say to them, okay, react. See if you can still don't use strength. That's always the first thing I always say to people, because otherwise the strongest person is just going to smash the other person. And it's, keep it as body movement based. See if you can still apply that technique, or at least the principle that technique is meant to be teaching you. And that allows people to have an open discussion about what they think that was or that technique is teaching them, which is good, because people often perceive things slightly differently. But then you see complete beginners twisting out of stuff or jumping out of stuff or pulling back or whatever. And you see what starts coming out, and you go, okay, so what you've done is, you've been trying to do that Nikio, and it's not when you've been turning out of it. You've moved into like a Hiji or a Rockio. Okay, let's formally do that technique then. Let's have a play with that. Okay, then let's go back to it again. Let's do the pressure testing. Next time the guy pushes, let's see you flow more neatly back into it. And they're learning two techniques, but they're also learning the flow between, and they're understanding the relationship between the two techniques, where one is basically the fail-safe of the other. And there's lots of techniques in jiu-jitsu and Aikido like that, where one technique is the natural flow through from the failure of another one.
Yeah.
It's just, Henkawaza is like black belt, it's nonsense. It should be, day one.
Yeah, it doesn't need to be, you have to graduate into it. In fact, I found that with Henkawaza or Randori or any what a lot of students will consider advanced stuff, that you can do that right from the get-go. In fact, if you do that, your students never have built up in their mind that it's really scary, it's super difficult, like there must be something mysterious that no mortal can actually understand. And they create this wall in their mind that makes it harder to do when they finally do get to doing it.
For sure.
And the more that you burn in the patterns, because as we know, when you're in a class, you are burning in the patterns into your body, the patterns of movement, even the patterns of how you think. So if you always think in terms of paired kata, you'll have a hard time breaking out of that later when you're expected to break out of it. So like you said, it's good to start on those things earlier on, and by lowering the pressure down and only working with just a couple variables, you can easily work with brand new people and have them enjoy doing it and have fun with it. That's a big, I think, thing of martial arts in general. It should be fun to do. You should enjoy doing it, as well as seeing good productivity in what you can learn in an hour or in a single.
I'm a huge believer. I taught kids before I taught adults. So when I was like a new black belt or whatever that was, just after that man discovered fire, I was teaching the kids class before I was doing anything else, because I just wanted to I liked teaching, and I just wanted to get some experience. And you quickly learn with kids, especially, is that you can be sensei and clap and try and be strict and stuff, but you see their eyes glaze over. If you can develop things they think are games, which are teaching them the same principles, you get way better reaction.
Sure.
So I try and keep the play mentality within the dojo. You get a much higher energy level. You get much better kind of, and then if someone does accidentally get a bit excited and someone gets walloped, which happens fairly regularly, no one takes offense at it. It's
right.
The atmosphere is better. It's the crossover between the pressure testing and the sparring. The two things for me are very much linked, because the minute you get people putting a little bit of something extra into a technique, and then the other person is reacting to it, by definition, you have a low-level sparring thing going on.
Sure.
And again, getting back to what we said earlier, whether it's the pressure testing or whether it's sparring, or whether you're merging the two things as a kind of a amorphous concept, the setting of the rules as an instructor is the hardest thing, because you've got to keep people productive, you've got to keep people interested, you've got to keep them safe, and then there's got to be a way of feeding it through to people that have just started and people that have got 20 years experience.
Yep. Well, one of the, it occurred to me too, and this is, as I was teaching it, I found one of the best ways to simulate something that I had a tremendous gift as I was coming up and through the Q ranks. And that is, I had another student who started about a year after I did, and he had the similar thing of what he wanted from Aikido that I wanted, which is to have my Aikido be powerful and useful against an actual real attacker. So when the two of us would partner up, we'd start out and we'd do the paired kata that we were shown from the instructor, and then I'd be like, okay, Mark, now give me some heat. I want you to start to screw up my technique. I want you to really make contact with me. I mean, put the emotional content in this, not just be a meat puppet for me to play with. And that's where I would start to pressure test just that one technique or that one response that we were being shown. Because I was always respectful to the instructor in the class. I didn't want to go off track and start doing my own thing. But between the two of us, we would like doing this with each other. And we were given, 5 minutes or something to work on a technique. And by the end, we're breaking a hard sweat trying to actually grab and punch or do whatever it is, attack the way that as intensely as we could imagine it being done, and still have Nage do the correct technique.
You were very lucky to have it.
And so, but I wouldn't do that with everybody, because not everybody that's not what they wanted. So I could and I wanted to share this in this because somebody might be thinking, well, what if my classmates just aren't interested in doing that, and I'm the only one in there? If you can just find one person that either maybe after class you go and play and do this, or you can, get clearance from your instructor that if the two of you are partnered up, you can start putting heat on each other.
That's what I was going to say. I think you were very lucky that you had an instructor that let you do that, because lots of dojos, that culture just isn't there.
Right.
But I think you hit the nail on the head there. Ask your instructor. Say, look, do you mind if we pressure test this a little bit? We'll be sensible.
Yeah.
Obviously, we'll practice the key on, and we'll do it with a bit of flow. Because back in the day, like for the Iwama guys, for example, they would do everything from the solid grip, then they'd do it with a step in, then they would do it with a little bit of flow where you start to make the technique as they touch you, and then you do it full kino nagari with the flow and leading the key and all that, which kind of is like a precursor to then adding,
right. It's a progressive step through.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, but I think, if you just ask your instructor, do you mind if there's going to be someone else in the dojo that doesn't mind getting a slap up around the head,
Well, yeah. And then, okay, if somebody's being difficult, what happens to your technique and how do you adjust it so that you're safeguarded? And what I found was it shored up my footwork. It improved my placement and timing. It also impressed upon me not to let them take the initiative when they came in. I had to move, usually like in a rimi in a turn, or I had to come in with my atemi, or I had to come in and intervene and take that initiative away. Once my uke has intent, like actual real intent to land a shot or make his attack succeed, you have to take that from his mind. And this is where every martial art competitor that I've ever met will say the exact same thing. Martial arts is about 85% mental and only about 15% physical. But if you're in that paired kata, there's no mental exchange, there's no intent, there's none of that, then you've gutted most of your practice, and all you're working on is just the physical, which is a small part. It's an important part for sure.
Absolutely.
But
Absolutely.
but you'll find out that other 85% just how crucial that is when you have that mental engagement aspect.
Just listening to you then saying the stuff that you discovered from training with your friend Mark, that alone allowed you to work out not just how you might modify things, but also the things that work for you specifically. You know, and I was thinking, okay, I can see what he's doing. I'm visualizing it in my head. I'm thinking, yeah, he's 6'4". Yeah, that's not going to work for me.
Right.
So for me, I ever get in close and do something horrendous because I'm like 175, whatever it is, or I keep distance and I try and pass to the back, or I use my feet. I've got a Wing Chun background, so and that's my strategy kind of thing. That underlies a lot of what I do. Now I've got a couple of guys that are kind of your size and are kind of very, very fit, athletic guys. They're much more likely to get involved and try and get hold of someone and use talk and try and pass to take someone's back. Or, I've got a real big, heavy guy who just dump people to the floor, uses his body weight. But unless you do that pressure testing, you don't find this out.
Correct.
It would be ludicrous for one of a big Maori boy who's bigger than my entire family to try and do what I do,
Sure.
because he's got all these other tools in his armory. Why on earth wouldn't he use that? So and again, this is the problem with being too adherent to, and I'm not being disrespectful to tradition. There's a Japanese kind of concept called shuhari, which is from the Go players.
Shuhari, yep.
Yeah. And it's basically, I'm probably translating this terribly, but it's basically acknowledging and learning from tradition, absorbing it and making it internalized and making it your own, and then purposefully evolving it and breaking away and kind of making it your own interpretation of the thing, with the mindset of making it right for yourself, but also for improving the overall concept.
Sure.
Which I love. I think that's fantastic. And from martial arts point of view, I think unless you're pressure testing and you're sparring and you're doing something that's scientific method is being applied to what you're doing, you're just never going to get past basically learning dance steps,
Right. And that's when you bring up the word traditional, I wanted to jump into that. If what we're talking about, you went back 100 years or 150 years and you talked to somebody who was a warrior who trained in these things because that was his profession, as opposed to civilians that are doing it for a hobby, they would say you were absolutely freaking insane if all you did was practice kata and expected to be able to perform. It's you're out of your mind. Like, you have to be able to manhandle somebody and do your technique on an active attacker, like flat out, or I don't even know what you're doing. And 100%. I think that this is, the part of the expectation of traditional being this stylized kata practice that teaches a martial art, because it has very severe limitations. And I get that it's a good way if you had one person that needed to teach 150 people in a session, that you just get everybody doing pattern movement together. That's how militaries tend to train, bayonet fighting and things like that, because it's hard to teach it that way. But it's also not very effective. But it's better than nothing, right? But that doesn't mean that martial arts were taught that way back through history, because they were not.
Well, it wouldn't be martial, would it?
Right, exactly. And people would do training like we do now and then get killed, and it would be kind of pointless. So, but that said, I also wanted to bring up what I consider the unsolvable training problem, which is you cannot go 100% intensity like you would in a fight and not have people injured. There's only really two approaches you can do. You can either armor yourself up with pads, helmets, and basically protection, and then go 100%, which even that is a distortion. Yes, you're able to apply 100% pressure, but you punch somebody that's got a helmet on, it's not going to affect them. They're just going to keep going. So that's not how a real
body
person would
changes
necessarily respond. Likewise, you say, I'm going to ditch the armor, ditch the padding. We're going to go bare hands and we're going to go 100%. And now you're going to, like you said, poked out eyes. You're going to get fish hooks and bruises, and everybody's going to get all banged up. So in training, that's really not the expectation, that your pressure testing is going to include 100%. Now you can get close, but in order to get close and do it even moderately safely, there has to be a level of control. This is not something you would do with white belts and newer students that are not controlled. You have to have a certain level of trained in control to start upping the intensity of your pressure testing.
But the problem then is if you, like we said earlier, about if you set anything within the syllabus as being advanced, you're adding a level of fear for the new people. So the conundrum I've been fighting with for the last couple of years is, how do I include everybody?
Right.
So and again, this is a constantly evolving thing, and every time I see another idea, I steal it. You know what I mean?
Well, good, because I have an idea for you.
Okay, so this is our 4 levels of sparring as it is at the moment. Again, anyone in the comments that's watching this that's got a better idea or is doing something interesting, please leave it, because I'm always looking for new ideas. So our level 1 sparring, which everybody does, is almost like a sticking hand. So it's upper body. I believe there was a video on the Martial Side group a while ago of a couple of lads doing a similar thing, where you basically, it's 50%, you're just holding on to each other's upper bodies, taking the head, trying to get to the outside, pushing the arms around, trying not to use strength. It's more of a body movement. It's a sensitivity exercise. You're trying to find gaps. So it's almost like Chi Sao in Kung Fu, same kind of thing. And you're just trying to feel where the resistance is, feel where the pressure is, and it gives people something to play with. But they can also learn to react and learn where the triggers are. Okay, I can feel he's planted his back foot, he's going to push diagonally through. If he pushes that shoulder, I can let him go, maybe I can get under the arm, etc. The second level we do then is a bit like a judo drill, and I did steal this from judo, where we hold each other's elbows, the gi elbows. We've got a couple of ex-judo guys, so they take it in Kumyuchi, where it's called a sleeve and a collar, but elbows is better. And then you're trying to basically get the other person down onto one knee or put them on the floor. You can trip, you can do foot hooks. Obviously, from a Wing Chun background, I use the hook feet quite a bit. You can, it teaches people to use upper body and lower body. It teaches people a toshi. It stops people from making too much space under the armpit, staying contained, push and pull. And if it's going well, it goes on for ages, and you'll get largely a stalemate, but it's a great exercise.
Sure.
And it's a bit more advanced. The third one, then, we do fingertips only, no armor, nothing. And it's head, shoulders, knees, and toes. And again, I stole this largely off someone else. So you're either trying to tap the hairline, the shoulders, the knees, or the feet, which then gets people used to people diving for their legs, because the single leg and double leg takedowns now are a pub fight reality, like it or not. Especially in New Zealand with rugby players, everybody tries to hit you at 100 miles an hour. And the thing with that then is, if we've got someone super tall and you can't reach their head, you go shoulders, sternum, knees, toes, or sometimes belt knot. Although the problem with belt knot, sometimes people get a slap in the wobbly bits. So you have to be a bit careful. But because it's fingertips, it's as quick as a normal fight. It stays, then people can throw stuff out, and it gets people, you see people naturally start to cage up, and they naturally drop their chin. It teaches that basics of, like a boxing stance, so they're not standing there like this, hit me, Sure. And then the last one, the level 4, which we don't do a lot. I've still got to invest in a lot of headgear, but that's with head guard, mouthpiece, fingerless mitts, and then it's 50-75% depending on the students, and we decide what the attacks will be. So we might go jab, roundhouse, or jab hook combinations in any order, and then you see what you can do. And if you can turn it into technique, or in a principle of a technique, so you can get underhook, take the back and a rimmy kind of thing, or you can roll them forwards and put the head down, a chiton kind of thing. That's considered, you've gained mechanical advantage. That's a point. So with all of these things, if the other person gets the advantage, you do a press up. So there's at least some accountability to it, especially with the kids. And so far, it's been working well. It needs, it's a work in progress. So as I said, if anyone's got any great ideas, but it just means that if you're doing something and people aren't quite sure why they're doing it, you can quickly throw in a variation on, especially the level 4 sparring, and it gives people a way of proactively testing what they're doing. And it's interesting because some people will suddenly get a light bulb moment and okay, I understand this. Other people will say, I don't think this is going to work for me. And also, and if in a particular situation with that particular partner, it might not be functional. It might not be the appropriate solution, in which case you've got to draw on something else. But at least they know that. If they're with a tall person, they're not going to try and do an up and over Ikkyo, So yeah. It's been interesting. It's been as interesting for me as I hope it has been for the students.
Yeah. I mean, those explorations are invaluable. And it's not that we all need to have the same solution, but we should all be working on our solutions. And it's cool that we can get together and share our ideas, because that's what will inspire others. And by the way, I've had a couple different instructors now in the last few months that have contacted me that have told me that they are actually reorganizing their curriculum because they want to do more things like this. And I've been thrilled to hear that. And even one just recently contacted me that he's going to basically overhaul Aikido to be more modern, realistic, and he's starting a new dojo. And I'm excited to work with them and just give them ideas and say, here's a bunch of things, here's the smorgasbord, go pick what you want from it and make it great.
Give him my email and I can tell him all the things that didn't work.
So the thing that I wanted to share, and I've got a couple of ideas on it. Firstly, I want to say I love sparring, but there's always something about it that has made me wonder there's something amiss with having that be a self-defense type situation. And that is, and it took me a while to really rationalize this, but it came to me like a light bulb of, in a self-defense situation, the goals are asymmetric. In a sparring situation, the goals are symmetric.
Yes.
And that's I wanted to have something that indicated the asymmetric nature of having, you're defending yourself from an attacker. And this is something that I got to liking it so much, I made it part of the yellow belt test. I do this to every single person doing their very first test in Aikido. And that is, I call it a one uke randori. I will have the attacker say, your job is to dominate Nage, and you can pretty much do anything you want and go. And it's not over until Nage has gotten control of uke and put him down. Doesn't matter what the technique is, but the main goal is don't get hit. So the way that I teach it, and I teach it kind of in layers the way that you do, the first job is to survive. Don't worry about applying a technique. You have to wait for your opportunity in order to do that. So I will teach a lot of head covers, and I have uke like swinging more like a wild person, because that's kind of a standard with a street fighter, with an assault, is somebody just getting, attack upon attack upon attack coming. And what I found is that learning head covers and shifting protects the head, and it makes Nage start to feel, okay, I'm not in a direct threat right now. If I'm moving around, I'm hard to hit. If my head covers are coming up, somebody can be flailing away and I can be safe. Like, if you don't feel safe, then whatever happens next is going to be trouble. You're going to be panicked, and then things go really off kilter. So what I teach is just basic footwork maneuvering around, because Aikido is all about movement, right? We want to be a moving target because we're harder to hit, harder to land, and we want to use head covers to keep from getting hit in the sensitive areas. We keep moving and we wait for that opportunity. So when I start teaching the head covers, I do it from a defensive standpoint. And I've covered this in my online program of, specific videos of how to do it, but I'll describe it. But with head covers, and this is the beauty of them, if you do the same head covers that like, let's say you're attacking me and I'm shifting around and I'm making it hard to hit, it's hard for you to get to me, but it's kind of a stalemate. You're going to keep swinging, and eventually you're probably going to connect something. But if I now turn offensive, because when I bring elbows up and now I move into your space with my elbows, now you have to respond to me. So this is that taking the initiative away from our attacker part. So we're basically almost steamrollering uke and threatening their space, using Urimi to encroach upon them and make them back off. And so I'm able to do this with white belts and have them feel comfortable in even a class or two doing it. And to me, that's the foundation to build on, is when you have that attacker, you're going to have to get into their territory and take that initiative from them and take away their will to dominate you, and have it turn in their mind into, oh my, I need to protect myself. I want to get away from this. That's the mind change that needs to happen in a self-defense situation, right?
This is fascinating. Earlier, I referenced the fact that you're a head taller than me. Mm-hmm. You're talking about head covering and then moving in with your elbow as the lead. Mm-hmm. And obviously it's a weapon, but also it's a sensitivity. It's your first point of contact, so you can feel where the structure is and the balance and stuff. I teach it from a cage and then into the spear, because I need the extra reach, because I'm a short ass.
Well, and that's the thing. Like, once you, and I'll do this too when I demonstrate this to students, where I'll have one that say, okay, you're swinging at my head and you're trying to hit me, and I'll kind of back up, and I want you to feel what happens. And I'll go for about 5-10 seconds, and I'll be backing up and evading and slipping, and suddenly I'll start moving into them, and they will back off right away. And I said, did you notice how different that felt? And they're like, oh yeah, that sucked. When I've had a shorter person, and they'll usually ask me, because they'll see me do it and my elbow tends to come in somewhere in this area on somebody, and they'll say, but I'm short. And I say, well, think about where that elbow goes in. And I'll drop down and I'll drive the elbow into the solar plexus or something. And they go, oh, that sucks. I'm like, it sucks for me too. If you come in with your elbows and your head's covered up and you drive into my rib cage or into my abdomen, and you come in with your body weight behind it, that will move somebody, and it's very unpleasant. I mean, it's not a knockout shot, but you will move somebody back, and you'll take their space. And then that elbow unfolds, and now you can get into, grab the gi rag, you can get into collar ties, you can get into something where you're taking control of their body, or you get an arm drag, you can get all kinds of great stuff from there.
And this also this also teaches what I would call Aikido or grappling relevant skills, because for example, some martial arts focus on the striking and they get very good at striking. I mean, we do bag work and we do but the thing with striking is that to go from an open fist and percussive open fist on someone, apart from the fact you might damage your hand, but to then open it up and to get hold of someone to be able to do the stuff that we do, you're actually much better off to have an open, to be leading with the elbow and fold it out to get the extension, or to be going in with like a shuto, or going in with a palm strike is my favorite. But being a musician, I don't want to smash these up any worse than they already are, And then you've got the instant reaction. Whatever you feel, you can hook into, and it transforms from a strike into a manipulation.
Right.
And again, you could teach those as formal drills, but why not do it as part of something that's much more immediate? I mean, that's absolutely spot on. I think it's common sense.
Well, and when I've talked to Stephen Scott,
there's other people speaking to you that are doing the same thing. I mean, within our organization, I think we all rub off on each other. So you see a gradual change, even amongst some of the more traditional guys. Sure. I've seen in their training now, they're getting much more creative with their application. I sat on a gang grading the other day, and lots of what the sensei was asking them to do was, you could tell they hadn't really done before. Okay, 2 of you grab him, and it was like, okay, this is good. It's put him under pressure. To do that in the grading as well was great. But they handled it. Their body movement was fine, and so that's what we should be getting to. But it's how do you shift the mindset? How do you get people to when people are used to a syllabus where you can print out a PDF and it's got this technique and the name and everyone knows what that is, and you do that move and it's ticked off, how do you shift that into something more broader scope, more concept based? This is the thing.
I'm glad you mentioned that, and especially with the grading, because we just did a showdown test the other night or last week, and the uke was a purple, or about to be tested for her purple belt, and she was just like, I said, you're a combination between a tiger and an octopus, because she didn't do the typical, and this goes right back to that kata. How many ukes will do an attack, even a spirited attack with intent behind it, and then just give up? Like, they stop and they let nage take their turn and get to just maneuver their body, and they're like, okay, I'll just go to the ground and I'll settle into a nice, I've been pinned position, and I'll wait for the pressure, and then I'll tap a little bit. She just kept going. She was like relentless. And it was hilarious because, I actually brought in somebody else, my grappler friend, to actually increase the pressure on him. I'm like, this is a showdown test. He needs to feel pressure and threat. Well, she, within 5 minutes, had him huffing and puffing. Like, she scared him, because when she would be taken down, she'd hook an ankle, or she'd wrap up and try to, keep going, try to evade the technique, test the pin, try to evade and not be drawn into the pin position, and then try to attack some other way. And because it was a showdown test, she knew that it was pretty much open license to be as annoying as an uke as she could, just to
but still safely.
Right.
Still
Yeah.
safe.
Yeah. And she wasn't a kamikaze, or anything like that, but it was more of a spirited attacker that you might get. It's not going to be one contact and then uke gives up. It's going to be, they're going to keep after you, and you have to learn things like, if you pin somebody, don't have your foot right next to them where they can hook it, because they will grab it, or they'll try to tackle you with it, or things like that. I think, to answer your question, that's the next step of breaking out of the normal one attack, the defense that goes really well, and you set them down and you follow into that pattern. It's now you have an uke who's relentless. They're not going to stop until you have control of them, flat out, and they'll try to evade the control. They'll push back against it.
That's the level 4 pressures testing mixed with the level 4 sparring. That's the two things coming together. So,
and you can start right with your paired kata and just add that in alone, and you will find a whole new world of of learning about technique when somebody's actively trying to get out of it. Now, the one thing that I found that's the tricky part, and that is and every uke does this, I've caught myself doing it many times, is what's going to be done. So you do your attack and then you retract back out quickly, because you're going into a trap and you don't want to be caught into that trap. But then the point I try to impress with students is, you have to, every time you're uke, you have to attack with the abandon of that somebody has no idea what is about to happen, and full commitment. If it's a strike, if it's a grab or something, it's got to be 100% like you mean to do this. Even if, and this is something that if you are a spectacular uke, you can have that 100% intensity and go 20% speed. You do not need to have the speed with the intensity.
You must have picked that out of my head. I was the hardest thing to teach to people is to put emotional content into an attack, like genuinely. And I've even had to do like little visualization things with some of my guys, especially the teenagers, because they kind of get all uncomfortable with it. But the emotional content and the intention of actually landing that strike, none of this putting a punch, but then still be able to do it at 50%.
Right.
And then if they get that, once their adrenaline starts going, not sneaking it up and trying to on either side, so you don't accelerate the technique past their 50% punch, so you can get past it with speed, because you couldn't do that in real life.
Right.
Trying to keep the thing, and it's a tough thing. It's a very tough thing.
I've met top martial artists that can't do it. I mean, Shihans that cannot do it. So it's a precious few that will let their ego go, will really be uke. They will give the body and commit into that attack, even though they know that it's going to get turned around. but to still follow through. Now, the other thing that I will say, and this comes back to what you said earlier about a Nage who will say, well, Uke retracts out. They've backed off. From a self-defense standpoint, isn't that a win? When your attacker decides to back off of you? Like, the goal is not to necessarily pin and control somebody. I mean, if you get that, is great. But if your attacker goes from wanting to rip your head off to backing off because they're afraid of you, well, now I consider that a win. You've made them rethink, do I really want to do this? And this is something that, in studying, you asked me before the show, I did a class on carjacking just the other night, where criminals are often very easily dissuaded. They thought they had an easy prey. And if you show them that you're not, and they back off, high level of probability, they're going to say, this isn't worth it, I'm leaving. Because they don't want to fight. They want a domination. They want merely to take. And this is how, self-defense really is about learning human behavior as much as it is, or far more than it is about learning, techniques or moves or things like that. And
what you were saying about the asymmetric,
right,
aspect,
the asymmetric goal, exactly.
Self-defense is about survival. That's
it is. And when you prove to a predator who thought they were going to have an easy time that you're not an easy time, chances are that's going to be where your self-defense, the physical aspect, will end. And it's not guaranteed, but it'll do a lot better than doing nothing or just trying to run. And so, I wanted to offer that in there too.
Well, I just want to round off by saying thanks for having me back on again. I know I tend to rant. I'm always getting shouted at for that. But genuinely, if anyone's got any ideas about adding sparring or resistance training into, what doesn't matter what art they do, I'm interested to see it, because sometimes the application or the way these things are systemized is as valuable as the actual as the actual training.
Sure.
So that would be great. Leave it in the comments. Obviously, over at the Aikido Silverdale channel, we've got hundreds of videos from every martial art under the sun. But the same thing applies. Anyone, if you're just coming over just to kind of be horrible to people, then we just block you and it's fine. But some of the stuff and some of the people we've met and some of the ideas that have come into the mix have been absolutely fantastic. And I think people like yourself that are like providing an open forum, and the Facebook group you run, and some of the other people on there, this with the way that information is available to everybody now, there is no excuse for anyone with an appreciation for the scientific method, shall we call it, not to be seeking to improve what they do, because we're not just relying on the sensei that comes to our village in the mountains to teach us all that we need to know,
Right.
And the notion now that Aikido is this, or Jiu-Jitsu is that, or karate is that, now is becoming nonsense, because it's down to the practitioner. Exactly. All arts now are merging. All arts are, and it depends on the individual practitioner, what you want from your art, what you can take from the people you're around you, and what you're willing to accept might need changing in your own practice. And I think that's the core to it.
Absolutely. And I wanted to leave people with one thought to ponder. And this is something that I've been thinking about the last few years, actually, and it's affecting how I teach and what I have my students do. We initially start by being reactive, right? We have Nage who has an attack, comes in, and they respond, and we know that from a strategic standpoint, that's a loser. We also have the Shodo Seizu principle, the control the first move. We watch Morihei Ueshiba engage with his uke before they get into range. He's controlling that first move. Could you then say, is Aikido a first strike art? And if so, if that is a sound principle of self-defense, of taking the first move when you know that physical danger is imminent, and you take the initiative away from your attacker who's building up ready to attack, how would that affect your kata training? How would that affect how you teach students to get them used to moving first, taking the initiative before? Just something to think about. Not going to
I think
discuss it here.
that's another podcast right there.
That's another one. Yep. So, excellent.
Well,
Well, thank you. Thank you, Duncan. It was great to have you on again.
Appreciate it, mate.
You bet. Take care. Have a good night.
Thank you very much for listening, and I hope you enjoyed this discussion. Stay tuned for more episodes. I've got some great stuff on the way very soon. In the meantime, enjoy your training.